Vice Mayor,
Well-
are you on the phone?
Well, welcome everyone to the Public Safety Veterans Subcommittee. The Vice Mayor will be joining us in a couple of minutes on the phone, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. Has anyone had a chance to review the minutes?
Move approval.
Alrighty, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, a motion is second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Call to the public. Do we have any cards from the public? Alrighty, at this time, there's no cards from the public, so we'll go into our information only. There's items 4 through 7. There's no presentations or planned, but however, if staff's here to answer any questions from my colleagues. Any questions? With that, we'll move on to item number 8. The Final Four, plans and activities. All right, sounds like fun.
Good morning, Chairman Nowakowski, members of the subcommittee, Lisa Jones, the Director of Homeland Security Emergency Management. We are here to give you an update on the Final Four, and we have Roxanne from the Convention Center as well as Police and Fire here to give you an update.
Good morning. I want to start by, first I should probably turn my microphone on. I want to start by saying next spring, all eyes of the sports world will turn again to Arizona. It'll be the first time that Arizona will host the Final Four for the men's basketball championship for the NCAA. And Phoenix again will play a very significant role in that Final Four week. Over the 5 days, Phoenix will host all the fan-related activities in the downtown area. We anticipate 77,000 visitors to attend these events over those 5 days. The 4 key events that they have for the fans include their Fan Fest, their March Madness Music Festival, their youth clinics, and the Dribble. And I do want to add that we are delighted that these events will showcase many of the downtown points of pride that we have. This is just a quick glance of the full schedule starting Thursday through Sunday of events that will be taking place. Starting off on Thursday, the Final Four week opens with the National Association of Basketball Coaches National Annual Convention. This is over 5,000 coaches, all levels from college, junior high, high school, community college, and the Division I, II, and III schools. In this national convention, it will be held at the Phoenix Convention Center. That there will include coaches, clinics, as well as on-court demonstrations. Also on Thursdays, Symphony Hall again will host the Salute presentation. This is a celebration of the 4 teams in their journey to the Final Four. This is by invitation only, and we do anticipate about 2,000 attendees to this event. Then Fan Fest opens on Friday. This is a 4-day Fan Fest activity. Unlike the college football playoffs, which was just 3 days of Fan Fest, this event will go from Friday through Monday. We do anticipate of those 77,000 visitors all to flow through the convention center. And this truly is a celebration not only of basketball for the NCAA, but for their 24 sports and their 90 championships across those sports. Of course, there will be interactive games and sponsor activations that will be taking place. Then there's their March Madness Music Festival. This is simply 3 days, 2 stages, 1 free music festival. This will be held at Hance Park. We're delighted to feature this downtown park as the music festival venue. It's a mix of national and local recording artists. In the past, those artists have included Pitbull, Kendrick Lamar, Maroon 5, Kenny Chesney, Bruce Springsteen. Of course, there will be food as well as music and merchandise to buy over this time. Then imagine on Sunday, as you come to downtown Phoenix, you see 3,000 youth dribbling a basketball through the downtown streets. This is the Dribble. We are delighted that this route will start at Heritage Square and end at the front door of the Phoenix Convention Center, where all those participating in the Dribble get free entry into the Fan Fest. And this is open to youth age under 18 and up to register for this event. And then concluding on Sunday evening is the Guardians of the Game Award Show by part of the NABC convention. And this is going to be at the Orpheum Theater. It really is a recognition of outstanding achievement and contributions to the game of basketball, the lives of the student athletes, as well as service to its community. There will be players and coaches awards will be recognized and given out as part of this award ceremony. City Hall atrium, as well as the outdoor plaza, will be the featured area for the pre-reception area for these activities. Of course, all this planning does take place to be able to pull off these events. We are underway with our planning efforts. We're using, again, our City Major Event Steering Committee and working groups to work through all of the programming. Well, of course, we'll develop our operation, communications, and contingency plans to support these programs. Also, in collaboration with our partners, we have the Phoenix Local Organizing Committee, and I do want to recognize Don Rogers, the president and CEO of the Local Organizing Committee, is here with us today, as well as the NCAA and its broadcast partners, Turner and CBS, DPI, and Valley Metro. I do want to add this year we've had greater collaboration with ADOT in our working groups. They traditionally have participated in our Streets and Traffics working group, our Communications working group, and our Public Transit working group. However, this year they are going to have participation in all of our working groups, parking, coordination, as well as permitting and signage working group, including our public safety. At this time, I will turn the presentation over to my public safety colleagues, and they can share their efforts in the planning.
Good morning. As Roxanne has already alluded to, there's going to be activities going on across the valley and across the region. As such, we have taken a regional approach as we've used in the past to be successful in these events, the same process for the planning itself and the event management. So the planning process includes monthly meetings with executive advisory, core planning, and resource working groups. The executive advisory is your policy level decision makers. They are briefed up as far as the latest information, as far as the planning processes, and this allows them to then feedback information to us as far as any direction they may have. Core planners are those from each of the different regions or strategic partners or stakeholders that are going to be affected to make sure they're collaborating and coordinating their efforts as well. And the resource working group is one of our successes. It allows us to pool our resources across the region and utilize those much better collectively than we could individually. We have an event in the morning in Phoenix and an event somewhere else in the afternoon, and we can utilize those resources that way. So it works very well for us in our successes. As far as how we'll manage our events here locally, we will be using our All Hazards Incident Management team. We will be activating our Emergency Operations Center. Currently, we anticipate to activate that EOC from March 30th through April 4th. Approximately 0900 to midnight are hours we've identified at this point. And then after hours, we will be able to respond. We'll be in a virtual state. We will do operational briefings every morning to make sure everybody understands the objectives for the day. This is our structure. I will cover the fire side and let Commander Alexander then expand on the law enforcement side. For us, we'll have a fire branch. Something unique to this event is we do have activities in the downtown area, the convention center, and our surrounding area, but as well as Hans Park, and then connectivity through 2nd and 3rd Street. So a little bit different, but with our system easily scalable to address this. We'll have prepared for from large to small events as far as fire rescue operations, fire prevention with managing occupancy loads, addressing any issues with fire code, ensuring public safety. Then our hazmat actually is a wide range of responsibility as far as being able to respond to any type of hazardous materials, question or incident, and also planning and monitoring for that. I'll now turn over to Commander Alexander. He can then brief you on the law enforcement side.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of subcommittee. Thanks for having us. For the law enforcement branch section, what we've done is basically duplicate the efforts that we put forth for Super Bowl and for college football, tweaking a little on lessons learned from those prior events to make this one even more successful than the other two. We break our events down into groups and divisions and have those individuals, we assign individuals to manage those, and we have those lieutenants or sergeants from the law enforcement side meet with their counterparts from the NCAA and Turner who are responsible for those specific sections of the event and plan that out. We started that process earlier this month when the NCAA and Turner came into town, and we will continue that till the event is finally planned out in April. Our goal is to have a preliminary operational plan for each one of these locations done early sometime in November, so that we can start our tabletop exercises later in the year prior to the event, so that by the time the actual event happens, we are well under our way and we'll have a safe event over the 4-day period. Along with our incident management team that we stand up in the EOC, we also stand up a multi-agency coordination center. We call it the MAC. It's the same thing that we did at Super Bowl and college football, and it utilizes or gives us the ability to utilize the EOC as a location to bring in all of our resources, federal, state, regional, and private, to help support all of the IMT and the operations, not only in the city of Phoenix, but wherever they may be occurring in the valley. So if Scottsdale has an event that is major and they have an incident management team, that will be housed in, a representation will be housed in the EOC. And the MAC is there to support that location as well as everything in the city of Phoenix. It's a great way to bring in resources so that they're readily available to all of the incident management teams throughout the valley and support the operations wherever they might be. This kind of a unique diagram is the intelligence component of running any major event. It really is nothing more than what we do every day in the valley as far as intelligence goes. It's the intelligence cycle. We simply duplicate this effort in the EOC and the MAC to support, again, all of the operations throughout the valley and all of the IMTs. It works very, very effectively every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we utilize it specific to these events so that anything that's going on intelligence-wise is directly fed into the incident management team so they can support their people on the street. It works very well. We take lessons learned from incidents that have happened around the globe and employ those in our planning process and utilize the information system and intelligence system to support that.
I just wanted to conclude our presentation that we continue to work closely with the NCAA and the Phoenix Final Four in finalizing this programming. I do want to share that we do have a shared vision with them to finish strong so that we can demonstrate that Phoenix as a whole city is one to host these mega events. This concludes our presentation on an update of the Final Four.
I believe we have the Vice Mayor on the phone.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. Any questions from my colleagues on the Final Four?
I have some questions. In coordinating all these efforts, what's the manpower that is placed for those 4 days in fire and police? I mean, what does that look like?
Councilwoman Pastor. We're early into the planning stage, but if it's anything like it was for college football or Super Bowl, we'll support the event with the needed law enforcement to make sure that it's safe. Numbers could vary. This event isn't solidified yet in everything that's going on. We know we have events downtown at the convention center, events at Hans Park, and possibly events that could stretch from Hans Park to the convention center. That all changes the amount of manpower that is going to be needed to support the event. It is significant, and we do that on purpose so that we can ensure that the event comes off without a hitch and that people that are participating in that event are safe.
And the reason why I was asking that question was because I'm thinking of our reservists. And, I'm just thinking of different ways of how we will manage the whole, not only just the event, but the whole city and how we bring in manpower. But I'm sure you guys have already thought of that and know what to do.
Councilwoman Pastor, we do utilize the reserve resources, and we also utilize civilian employees
Okay.
wherever we can to augment sworn officers and firefighters so that we don't have to pull as many people off of the street to support the event as we possibly could if we didn't utilize those resources.
And Chairperson Nowakowski, Councilwoman Pastor, on the fire side, we basically really try to balance what is the manpower we need to not affect operations out every day as far as crews responding, because we really have to maintain, obviously, public safety throughout the region. So we balance that. We also use our CERT program as volunteers to staff a lot of the Emergency Operations Center, a lot of those positions. So we use a combination of volunteer and paid people for those roles. But we're constantly aware of really what is that balance point, that tipping point for us.
Thank you.
Any other questions from my colleagues?
It's exciting. Yeah, it is.
Very exciting. I just really want to welcome Lisa Jones, our new Homeland Security and Emergency Management Director on staff. It's a new position that we have here in the city of Phoenix. And if you haven't been to City Hall, there's changes. And maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure.
Put you on the
Well,
spot.
I've been with Phoenix Fire for 23 years, and I'm a deputy chief at Phoenix Fire, and excited to come over. Been working with the former director, Kevin Cockbrenner, for the last month or so. He will continue to transition me, so no one be afraid. We will manage the transition very well. So I'm looking very much forward to this role. I realize the magnitude of the role, and I'm looking forward to taking it to the next level.
Well, welcome in.
Thank you.
We're gonna have some fun. All righty, with that, we have item number 9 that's coming up, hiring of our police officers update.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. I have Commander Brian Lee here with me today. He's going to do the presentation. Brian's a newly promoted commander. He's got a lot of experience, really helped with some of our events in the past. We'll put him in charge of Employment Services Bureau because he's very articulate, he's very attention to detail, and that's what we need right now as we move forward and hire a lot of police officers for our city. Just this last fiscal year, 15-16, you gave us the authority to hire approximately 300 people. We hired 295. We hired that many. They went through the academy. By the time they graduated from the academy, we had about 170 new officers last fiscal year that hit the streets. That's very exciting for us, and we're looking forward to this next fiscal year as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brian. He'll give you a brief overview of our hiring.
Thank you, Chief. There we go. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. With the support of the mayor and council, the Phoenix Police Department was given authorization to resume our hiring practices in fiscal year 2015-2016. The department's hiring efforts are guided by a multi-year hiring schedule that was developed in cooperation with Budget and Research and was later approved by council. Provided that the revenue and expenditure projections continue to perform as expected, it's anticipated that this plan will allow for the hiring of more than 500 positions through fiscal year 2018-2019. This hiring plan which also takes into account attrition and other factors, resumed in full effect in March of 2015, and it continues to support an incremental hiring strategy through fiscal year 2018-19. These hiring efforts resulted in the hiring of 264 police recruits and 31 police lateral officers for a total of 295 officers hired during fiscal year 15-16. With the support of the mayor and council, an additional 145 positions have been allocated to the hiring plan for fiscal year 2016-17. In addition to that, 55 attrition carryover positions are included. In total, the department's poised to hire a minimum of 200 sworn positions in the current fiscal year. And while Budget and Research will continue to update the department's authorized attrition carryover position numbers on a monthly basis. Although it's very encouraging, we must understand, though, that this doesn't necessarily mean that all these newly hired officers are going to hit the street over the course of the next year. The Phoenix Police Department has an 8-step hiring process for the position of police recruit, and this process includes the following: online application, a written exam, a physical agility exam, background investigation packet and interview, polygraph exam, medical exam, psychological exam, and a controlled substance screening test. This process can take between 3 and 6 months to complete based on a number of factors that may keep a candidate from being offered a position with the Phoenix Police Department. Successful applicants begin a 20-week basic training academy at the Arizona Law Enforcement Academy, known as ALEA. ALEA currently serves 24 user agencies, with 9 of these agencies being out of state. There's currently 137 police agencies in the state of Arizona. Upon graduating from ALEA, our new officers attend a 3-week post-academy that is specific to Phoenix Police Department policies and procedures. And following post-academy, the officers will embark on a 16-week field training program, which, upon successful completion of field training, these officers are now deemed to be solo capable. To support the hiring efforts, the police department established a recruitment team consisting of a sergeant and 6 officers. The team is guided by a comprehensive plan that strives to ensure recruit candidates are qualified, capable, and diverse, so the department can continue to maintain the high service standards residents expect while also being reflective of the community served. As part of the recruitment efforts, the team's engaged in many forms of community outreach. Some of the most recent activities include, but are not limited to, attending job fairs, informational meetings,
presenting information at citizen advisory board meetings, assisting with recruit testing, responding to social media inquiries about hiring and recruiting, liaisoning with military and institutions of higher education, maintaining the department's recruitment website, and liaising with print media and other media outlets. Administration of the written and physical agility assessments continue to take place monthly. Detailed information about the testing process is updated regularly on the department's website. As of August 31st, the department has already hired 55 sworn positions to date, and we have to add an additional 28 to that for the folks that just started yesterday, which brings us to a total of 83 officers that have been hired so far this fiscal year. To provide context, the current sworn composition of Phoenix PD is as follows: 83.5% male, 16.5% female, 74.7% white, 4.1% African American, 16.9% Hispanic, and 2.6% Asian. An all-Phoenix police recruit class, number 493, was comprised of 48 police recruits, 42 of which remain actively engaged in training at the academy, commenced on June 20th of 2016, and will graduate from the Arizona Law Enforcement Academy on November 4th of 2016. Happy to take any questions.
Mrs. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Go back to the hiring plan update. You hired 295, but how many did you say actually graduated and were eligible to go on the street? 170 something?
Mr. Chairman, Councilwoman Williams, yeah, about 170. We have about a 20% attrition rate in the academy. So even though we have a very rigorous hiring process, the 8-step process that Brian was talking about, once we get into the academy, we lose about 20% of our people we hire.
Okay.
So that comes back into that attrition that Brian was talking about. So we add those positions back in. We don't lose them, we add them back in. So we get our full bang for the buck at the end of the day.
So 16, 17, the 200
Right.
includes the attrition from the year before.
Yes, so the actual numbers from BNR are 145 for hiring in 16, 17. So you add the 55 positions that are attrition positions to that, gives you that 200 with a little asterisk on it.
But do you expect to lose the same amount, the same 20%?
Yes, and that's historical for as long as I've been here. We lose, it's a rigorous training. I mean, we
I know.
carry guns on the street. You're well aware with some of the law enforcement in your family. But yeah, that's been a historical 20%. It's ebbed and flowed a little bit, but it's been pretty consistent over the course of the years.
How many can go through the academy at one time?
We can do, and Brian, please comment on this, we can do about 12 to 14 classes a year, and that's pushing. And realize that we're a regional police academy. This is just not Phoenix PD. So we have to, service other departments, DPS included, as far as numbers of people in the class. So the 295 that you gave us last year, those authorized positions, that's getting very close to our limit. Could we go a little bit higher? Maybe. Could we do a Shift 2 academy? Maybe. But those, we're doing pretty well. We're very happy with the numbers that you've provided us. It allows us to get the best candidates possible.
So we're gaining more than we're losing.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions for my colleagues? All righty. Thank you, Chief.
Brian?
Thank you, Brian.
I do want to say something. Chief Yonner, I think you should raise your left hand. No.
Yeah, it's less.
Yeah. See that new shiny
I saw something
brass,
sparkly in
shiny
there.
gold ring?
I'll be talking with my right hand from this day forward. Thank you.
Congratulations.
But Chief, when
Very
did you
much.
get married?
Yeah, I got married last Sunday,
And what was the
He's
date?
still smiling.
9/18.
What does 9/18 represent for,
We're not going to go there.
for police
Thank
officers?
you all very much.
Thank you, Chief.
Congratulations.
So that's a homework for everyone to look up what 9/18 means in police code.
I know what that means. I was accused of that often.
All righty, so we're on item number 11. Oh, item 10, I'm sorry about that. Fire.
Chairman Nowakowski, committee members, good morning. We want to thank you once again for allowing us to provide you an update on firefighter recruit hiring as we are right now. I know our last update was about the winter of 2016 of last year, so we want to give you the latest information on where we're at with our current hiring status. And then as we start to move forward with our upcoming application and testing and hiring process that we're looking forward and coming up in the next couple of weeks. And then we're very pleased, then we'll talk about in our presentation and talk to you about the award of a SAFER grant that we were able to receive from FEMA. So I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Chief Wes Patterson. Wes oversees our personnel department and our section that oversees firefighter recruit testing, selection, and hiring too. So I'll give it over to Wes.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. I'd like to start off just by giving you a brief overview of our current process and where we're at. And get the correct slide up. So one of the most important things for us, obviously, is that we have a quality recruitment and quality selection process. And the benefit of that is obviously we have a very low turnover rate and a very high retention rate. So our process of selecting recruits is incredibly important, and we feel that we have a very strong process for that. And just getting back to the current process that we're in, which began last year, we began with 2,477 applicants. Due to some of them not meeting minimum qualifications and or self-selecting out of the process, we had 1,621 participate in the written exam. Of that, 1,089 successfully passed that exam. And since that time, we've hired 3 recruit classes, and we interviewed a total of 670 people that participated in the oral interviews. In our future hiring, we have a new process starting next month. Our new recruitment period opens October 3rd for our next group of eligible candidates with a written test date of November 16th. And we're actively, getting the word out and putting that out to the community so that we can get a good quality pool of candidates. And to do that, we use our affinity groups and a variety of resources. I think Chief Seville is going to speak to those in a minute. But our affinity groups are a big part of attracting quality candidates and getting folks to show up to these processes. So again, that we can hire those quality folks. In the next 3 years, our scheduled hiring process is we're looking at 32 new recruits in 2017, 34 in 2018 and 19. And sworn firefighter hiring update of where we've been in the last 3 years up to this current class. In 2014, we hired 21 firefighters recruits, and that was partially done with a SAFER grant and city funding. In 2015, we hired 119 firefighter recruits. As the economy has recovered and we've been able to come out of increase in economic indicators, we've been able to increase that. So this in 2016, as I mentioned, the current process that we're in, we've been able to hire 26 recruits in Class 16-1, 25 recruits in Class 16-2, and then our current recruit class, which begins October 24th. We just finished oral interviews 2 weeks ago for that class, and we made 30 offers and 29 accepted. We had one candidate that actually got 2 offers from 2 cities in the same day, and they chose to go with another city. So we'll be bringing 29 candidates in on October 24th. That class also will finish early. They'll be in the stations early in 2017. And just a brief update on the minority demographics of where we're at department-wide versus what we've hired in 2016. Department-wide, we are roughly 1% for American Indian, Asian, 7.3% African American, 17.3% Hispanic, and 4.9% female. And of the 80 recruits that we hired in 2016, including the class that starts October 24th, we are at 1% Pacific Islander, 1% Asian, 14% African American, 14% Hispanic, and 5% female.
To kind of wrap this up, to speak about our firefighter recruitment strategies, We have had a concerted effort to reach out to the universities and our local community colleges to make sure that we're looking for qualified, diverse candidates who can come into a very challenging career from a mental standpoint, from a physical standpoint. We have been working closely to market firefighter recruitment and the job of being a firefighter to our student athletes, along with at a lot of the community colleges. We're working with the Firefighter 1 and 2 academies and the fire science programs too. Then also too, we have many of our members who are current Phoenix firefighters that are instructors at local high schools that they see the next generation of firefighters coming up too. So I will let you know is that I'm very proud of the men and women of the Phoenix Fire Department. I would definitely say that we have roughly about 1,600 sworn members out there every day, over 520 square miles of the city of Phoenix that are working in the community, in the churches, in the schools every day too, that are looking for qualified candidates too. So we have a very informal grassroots effort with our firefighter recruits and our firefighters out there too as well. We have Marine Week on here. That was one of our last huge military campaigns that we did for recruitment. But one thing that I really want to emphasize too is that it's just not a one-time effort for reaching out to veterans. We have a local affinity group that are Phoenix firefighters called Fire Vet. And those are Phoenix firefighters that were veterans before in the previous years that are working with current military members that are deployed or military members that are currently going to be coming off of enlistment that are entering the job market. So our firefighters who are veterans, they can talk to them about the rigors of coming back into the job market and the requirements to become Phoenix firefighters as well. Every year now we do have a Phoenix Fire Department Career Day where we bring down potential candidates to our training academy, and we show them what the job of a firefighter is. We do simulations of car fires and vehicle extrications and treating patients, but then also too we do Q&A sessions with our personnel department, with city HR, with our labor organizations too, to talk about the best practices of getting hired with the Phoenix Fire Department too. So that has been very successful. At our last Career Day, we had over 200 first-time applicants come into Career Day to kind of see what the job is all about. This is the 21st century. Social media is huge for us. We understand that getting the word out through social media is something, everybody has a smartphone, everybody is always on a computer. The ability for us to communicate via Twitter, via Facebook. We also have a Phoenix Fire Department Spanish Facebook page that we can reach out to the Spanish community to. And I know, Councilwoman Pastor, that was one of your concepts and one of your questions you had last time, how we're reaching out to the Hispanic community. We know that's a continuous effort for us as well in the schools and also too through media. We know from the Latino community too that it's not just reaching out to those potential candidates, it's reaching out to those family members. It's reaching out to the parents who may see that that a job with the Phoenix Fire Department could be for something for one of their members of the family too as well. Wes has mentioned it to our affinity groups. Very proud to say that we have affinity groups that represent various demographics within the city. I'm very also want to mention too that we have the Valley Women's Firefighter Society. That is a group of Phoenix firefighters from command officers down to line level firefighters that are working right now with over 110 female candidates, taking them through the paces of the physical part of the job, of nutrition, of work-life balance, what it means to be a mom and maybe a wife and also be a Phoenix firefighter too. So it's very educational for those members and those candidates to go through that mentorship program too as well. One last thing that we did from an outreach standpoint is in conjunction with the city manager's office and our communications office, we worked, and Phoenix PD, we worked to develop a Women Who Keep Phoenix Safe campaign. You can go to phoenix.gov/women and you can see the campaign where we spotlighted 5 of our newest female firefighter recruits, and it talks about their background and their story and what brought them to being to the Phoenix Fire Department. So we're hoping to kind of generate that interest again, once again, as we start to recruit starting next week as well too, and we've been leading up to that. That concludes our presentation. The last thing I really want to talk about is SAFER grant. We have just been awarded $9 million by the federal government through FEMA. I will let you know is that this is very exciting for us to be able to hire 55 firefighters. That will be adjusted with our 2017 hiring plan. We will make sure that we meet the 50 recruits on there till we can hire those two as well. But The good thing about this too is that, and all of you know, this body knows, as well as many in the city government knows, that SAFER grant has been a saving grace for the Phoenix Fire Department too, to be able to meet our staff and to meet our service delivery out there. This has been a collaborative effort with this body, with mayor and council, with the city manager's office, and then also our internal partners with budget and research, city HR, to be able to apply for these grants. Government relations has been great, and we just know that this was not done in a silo. This has been a collaborative effort as well too. So we are very grateful and want to acknowledge that as well too. So that concludes our presentation. We will take any questions.
Any questions for my colleagues? Vice Mayor?
So I'm sitting next to School Board Member Pastor. The Franklin Academy, I think she spent some time down there with our future firefighters. Are any of the people in this class, this may be an unfair question, graduates of that program? It's an unfair question.
Committee members, Councilman Gallego, Vice Mayor Gallego, I'm not sure coming out of Franklin, but I do know that we do have alumni from Franklin High School that are Phoenix firefighters. As a matter of fact, the last time we met with the Franklin High School administrators too, they spoke very highly of one of our firefighters that's right in the downtown area that is first due to Franklin High School. So that's something we can definitely check into to kind of see if there has been that succession plan, that succession efforts coming from Franklin too. But off the top of my head, no, I could not tell you if any of our members of the current classes have been from Franklin High School.
Wonderful. Just always good to know what our great recruiting leads are. Did we track what % veterans the new recruits are?
For this class, we do not have the information, but we can get that to you obviously through the city manager's office too. So, but we work with, like I said, we work with fire vet on a regular basis too. But we have seen, I would definitely see sitting on the first and second rounds of interviews, we are starting to see many of our military members that are coming from combat arenas, coming from multiple deployments. And you're starting to see more and more from all branches of service too, male and female too as well. But we can definitely get those numbers for you.
Since we are the Veterans Subcommittee as well, it's always
We are, yes.
nice to see that overlap. And I think particularly Councilman Nowakowski has been very passionate about getting more veterans in our city workforce, although I'd say that's probably something that unites
yeah.
all 9 of the city elected officials. And then we've noticed that firefighters are very competitive, or many of them are. And then among groups like Bomberos, J.W. Robinson, I don't know, either Rosie Ladder or Professional Women's Firefighters. So who are our leading partners on recruiting?
Oh, it depends who you ask.
They would each say they're
They would
winning?
each say that they're the best. I would definitely say that as a recipient of the mentorship program for the Valley Hispanic Bomberos, they have been active for the last 25 years. The J.W. Robinson has been very active for African-American applicants too. So I'm very pleased to say that when we see quality candidates come through the entire selection process, is that all of those affinity groups are putting quality work in. The new Valley Women's Firefighter Society too, they just had a huge group of female firefighter candidates come through as well too. So they're very competitive. I have to work with all of them too, so I make sure I'm not going to give any preference to.
Well, certainly, I think the council all appreciates their work to help us make sure we
Very much so.
get the top recruits. Thank you.
Any other questions for my colleagues?
I have one question about the SAFER grant. Is that 50 additional firefighters from the one that I just added up? I think there's 176 from 2016 on that we will hire. And that's in addition to?
So if you go to slide number 4, I don't know if we go back to that, Wes. Our initial hiring plan was to hire for 2017. We were going to hire 32 recruits. We will max that out with 50 recruits. So no, that is not in addition to 50. That is not 50 on top of the 32. So we will do 32 plus the remainder of the 50 as well too for that SAFER grant. So we will. That is the performance period for that SAFER grant to hire 50. That'll sustain us for wages, benefits, and fringes for the year of 2017.
So 2017, we will hire 32 plus the 50, or we'll break it down 32 plus 25, and then the following year 25?
No, ma'am. What Councilwoman Pastor, what we'll do is our initial hiring plan was going to be 32 for the year of 2017. We will make the SAFER grant will allow us to hire the first 50. Then based upon attrition, we will see if there's any more that we will have to hire on after that too. Right now, with the 32, we would probably, I'm doing the math in my head, was at 18 more firefighter recruits in that first part of 2017. We have to make sure that we want to take advantage of that funding for the first part of 2017 so we get the full 2 years of funding with that too. So no, to answer your question, that is not 50 in addition to the 32.
Okay, so
We will
then
pick
we'll
up-
use that funding to hire the 32.
32 plus 18 more.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we're using that funding for this
Yes,
hiring?
yes.
Got it.
Councilmember Williams?
Is the SAFER grant supplanting what was budgeted for new hires?
No, ma'am, no, we are not supplanting with any of that funding. Like I said, we will specifically hire those 50 that will fall under the requirements of that performance grant. And then based upon any subsequent classes in 2017, 2018, we will make sure that that is separate from any city budget funding too. So we've been very cognizant of the fact that we need to use SAFER grant for specific funding for those recruits. So we need to make sure that we will continue to do that too. So no, supplanting any city budget funds along with FEMA funds, we'll keep them
Actually,
separate.
I don't want you to lose the funding, I want you to hire more.
Right.
Is the
appreciate that.
object of this conversation. It just seems like if you got that SAFER grant, you ought to be able to take, if you had a budget set for 32, then you ought to be able to add 25 to that using the SAFER grant, or
Yes, and what we're doing, we're working with budget and research because we've been given, and I know you've seen the presentations at policy and at formal too, that our minimum staffing number is 1615. We'll make sure that we still hover around there and meet that requirement too as we start to meet with attrition too. So that's something that we need to work closely with budget and research too to make sure that what is going to be our actual number too with that, with city budget, then also too with FEMA budget.
but you said minimum.
Minimum staff, yeah, we always maintain a minimum staffing to include also to sick leave and vacations and people that go off on industrial. We call it minimum staffing in the Phoenix Fire Department.
Does that mean maximum? I mean, minimum sounds like you should be able to hire more than that.
That is something we're in conversation with right now, yes. We obviously too, throughout the last 7, 8 years, because of budget concessions too, we've had to reduce some of our services too, but to make sure that we're keeping our trucks running, to make sure that we're meeting the 57 fire stations that we have out there, 65 engines, is that we always want to maintain our 4-person minimum staffing on engines, and on certain ladders, especially in the downtown area, we have 5-person minimum staffing as well.
Now, I'm just thinking that you ought to be able to hire more to go past the minimum standard, to go back and beef up the squads where you've cut numbers, and to provide better relief for the vacations, for sick leave, and for the emergency. So if you need us to talk to budget and research, I'm sure we're willing to do that.
I'd like to make a suggestion that budget and research come and talk to us regarding the 32 that was already budgeted. And why isn't 82 individuals being hired? And why are we limiting it to 50?
50 is a SAFER grant.
No, but I mean 50 total,
Yeah.
including the 32 that was already allocated. So we should have about 82. So if they can come back to us and maybe explain it to us,
Okay,
that'd be great.
we appreciate the support.
Any other questions? I have a question. Looking at the recruit of minorities, we have Hispanics, which the department-wide is 17.3, and we're looking at the police is at 16.9 current. But when you come to recruiting, and this is one of the things that we've been advocating for, is that 14% of the recruits are Hispanics. So if you're low on department-wide, why isn't there more Hispanics being recruited? And police is at 27.7 of their recruits are Hispanic. And then the female is the same thing, is that department-wide, you're at 4.9. Recruit, it goes up a decimal to 5%. And where you look at your counterparts, the police officers, they're at 13% department-wide, and recruit-wise, they're at 16.5. So I think we can do a little bit better in recruiting of Hispanics and females, and our police officers need to do a little bit better job in recruiting African Americans. So I think that's two things I think both recruits need to look at, is how we can recruit more females and Hispanics to the fire department, and more African Americans to the police department.
Yes, Chairman, now Council Command members, that is always an effort of us to look for best
Budget and
practices.
research.
To look for best practices.
All right. Budget and research. All right.
Here comes trouble.
All right. So
Now for the
basically,
depressing news.
so the question is, we got a grant for 50 new officers. We had an allocation of 32 in our new budget. Why isn't it 82 And we're limiting it to 50
So,
only.
so the way we intend, and we're still working with fire on this, the way we intend this, if you recall back to the public safety balancing plan, fire can maintain 1,615 swarm positions with its existing resources. So what we intend to do, and again, Danny and everyone we've been working on, the SAFER grant, we intend to advance higher. So take people that are projected in future years because they've got some pretty big drop years coming up. And so what we're going to use the SAFER grant as leverage to go above 1615 temporarily to deal with those big drop numbers. And then once the grant expires, we'll come back down to 1615. So that's the intended use of the grant.
So how many people are we expecting to be dropped? Is it 18 or is it?
Oh,
more
no, the
than
drop
18?
numbers for this year, I can't remember off the top of my head, Councilman, but they've got a pretty healthy drop number this year. I think it's over 35, 40, somewhere in that range.
Yes, just for this year alone, yeah, we're in that range too. Then 2018 is going to be another big year for us too, where we're starting to see a lot of our senior members who are retiring from firefighter all the way up to chief officers too. So 2018 is going to be, we're going to see another huge exodus of senior members going out the door.
So the intent will be to go basically above 1615 by as many as probably 40-ish, to go like 1650, 1655, somewhere in that range, just to deal with those future drops, but knowing at the same time we can't sustain that without additional resources, either in the 3 specialty funds or the general fund. So the intent is to leverage this grant to advance higher so that they've got people in the pipeline ready to go when those big drops come and they're prepared for it and they don't dip down significantly below 1615. That's the way we intend to leverage the grant.
Any other questions?
I'm thinking this through. So what's happening is in 2016, it says 51 recruits hired, and currently hiring third class of 25 additional recruits. The additional recruits, are we using the SAFER grant at this moment to hire them?
What was on the initial hiring plan, Councilwoman? No. The initial hiring plan that we developed was using the specialty funds. Because we keep all of the general fund positions filled, what we've been doing over the years to balance the specialty funds, as we get vacancies in the general fund, we move firefighters and police officers, for that matter, out of the specialty funds
And
back
into-
into the general fund
Okay.
positions to balance out those funds.
The budget, okay.
This year, last year, what we've been doing, all of the hiring that you see has predominantly been in the specialty funds, not the general fund, because that's where the vacancies are, because we've basically been manufacturing attrition by moving people in and out of those funds. So the hiring that you see that we presented to you back in February when we talked about the update to the balancing plan, almost 100% of that hiring was to the 3 specialty funds. So we're still going to do that, but what now we're also going to do is be able to look forward to a future hiring plan where we may have been hiring, say, 30 people in fiscal year 17, 18. We can use the grant now to hire those people early, save money in the specialty funds because the grant will pay for those positions for a couple of years. And because it's not an adopted budget for 17, 18, it's a projected plan, it is not supplanting because there is no adopted budget.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense now. And so basically, we're hiring up front
Correct.
with using the SAFER grants.
Correct.
And as the SAFER grant
Think of it as
tails
advanced
off,
hiring. Think of it as
Right.
advanced hiring,
And
accelerating hiring.
as it as we go to the future, when it terminates in 2 years, then we're able to be at the numbers that we
Correct.
projected we were going to be.
Correct.
We're just hiring faster.
Correct.
Got it. That makes sense now. Thank you.
Sure,
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
no problem.
Next, we have item number 11.
Wanted to clear up this planting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of this subcommittee. I'm Denise Olson, CFO for the Finance Department, and we are here with the Police Department to talk about the upcoming procurement for general services towing. A little bit of background information. We've had 3 contracts in place since the year 2012. These 3 contracts cover 4 towing zones. These contracts will be valid through the end of January of this upcoming summer. And we do have the option to extend these contracts through January of 2018. However, due to requests from the industry on fee structuring and also because of decreases in the scrap metal market, the Finance Department is recommending that we reissue the towing solicitation at this time. Again, we have 4 towing zones. We've also handed out a map so that you can visually, or we will hand out a map so you can visually see where each of these zones are. It shows you who the vendor is for each zone and also the number of tows. In fiscal year 15-16, we had about 33,000 tows, and that amounted to about $2.1 million. So when we go forward with this solicitation, there's some considerations that we need to take into account. One is we want to maximize competition. We want to make it convenient for our residents, so where your car gets towed is somewhat close to where the car ends up as far as the towing yard. We also want to make sure we have the lowest cost possible for our vehicle owners. We want our residents to be treated fairly by the towing industry. And one of the most important things is we want the response time to be minimized. If you think about it, this is a 24-hour operations. If we have an accident in the middle of the night, we need those tow companies to respond very quickly, both to clear the area and ensure safety for our police officers, our vehicle owners, and also for our citizens. So going into this procurement process, there are options. And so to talk about these options, I'm going to hand this over to Jim Campion, who is our procurement manager.
Thank you very much. There are 3 options that we're going to talk about today. We did some research over the summer. Option 1 is to issue the RFP with the current process, obviously with some improvements and fine-tuning some requirements and scope of work. Just a little background. In 2012, the council authorized staff to change the towing procurements. The city was broken into 4 zones. And the goal was to maximize competition. And tow companies could propose on 1 or more zones under this plan. There was also a requirement built in for 20-minute response time. Currently, we're experiencing about 11 to 14 minutes wait time, so we're below the 20-minute requirement. Additionally, into the procurement process, there was built contract oversight. The police department monitors the tow providers and their performance, and they perform audits. So that's option 1. Option 2 is go out and do an RFP and contract with a third-party towing management company. It's similar to an Uber-type service. The towing management companies are contracted to dispatch tow companies and manage the tow providers. Under this plan, Phoenix would not contract directly with tow providers. They would just contract with the towing management company. The towing management companies indicate under this plan that wait times are reduced and there are real-time online search available for vehicle owners to locate their vehicles. There is no city involvement or representation under this model, so if there's an issue with a tow provider, the city's not involved with that. The towing management company would have to work to resolve those issues. The increased costs compared to the current process is passed on and paid for by the vehicle owner under this plan. The next option is bid the entire city as one contract. Just for some background, prior to the current contract, the city used to contract under this option. There were 8 precincts served by 1 provider. Under this option, police department would only have to manage 1 company versus multiple towing companies. One of the issues is a tow company would have to be able to provide and have the capacity to handle in excess of 30,000 tows annually under this plan. Staff also felt there potentially could be increased wait times for vehicle owners and, of course, the officers. And so those are the 3 options that we had for you today. Obviously, we're open to talking about others.
So the police department and the finance department are making the recommendation for option one, which is to bid all 4 zones. This is going to allow for maximum competition. It's also going to allow for the best pricing. It includes minimal wait times, as Jim pointed out. Right now, they're between 11 and 14 minutes. We also believe this provides good customer service to our residents. In addition, we're recommending a 3-year contract term with 1 2-year option to extend. As far as the evaluation criteria, we have about 40% related to price and 60% related to method of approach, experience, and past performance. And with that, we would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for my colleagues? Councilmember Pastor?
I need a little context and history, because when I was reading my packet, it said in 2012, the city council approved changing the city's former practice of contracting with one sole tow vendor to provide towing services for the entire city, to contract with no more than 4 vendors in 4 established tow zones. So can you give me some history as to why it changed to 2012, or who has the history?
So Councilwoman Pastor, before 2012, we did do a solicitation for 8 precincts. During that solicitation process, one vendor won all precincts. So we ended up in a contract with one vendor. In 2012, we developed 4 zones, and then we bid each zone separately. We ended up with 3 contracts for the 4 zones. Does that help?
Let me clear, I was actually on the subcommittee, and I was one of the individuals that were pushing for the 4 zones. The reason being was at that time, we were having a lot of businesses, and a lot of our vendors at the city were actually going bankrupt. So we were thinking for a safeguard, it'd be nice to have another towing company, but now seeing that things have turned around, I'm open to having one vendor for the whole city. If they can actually accomplish the 30,000 tows and they have enough yards to staff all the tows and stuff.
I also was on that committee, and I recall the fact that we set up the different zones because of the distances. In some areas, it's much more costly. Take the far north, since I'm the most familiar with that. They have to travel much further, potentially, than the inner city. And I recall that's one of the reasons we did put it in the 4. However, I have no objections if we allow the same company to bid on all 4, providing that's acknowledged in the RFP, that, we understand that there could be a cost difference between the zones.
Yes, Councilwoman Williams, you're absolutely correct. One of the considerations that Jim went over is if you have 4 precincts, the chances of a tow yard being closer to the point of where the vehicle was towed is better than if you had a city-wide approach. Some other advantages of having multiple towing companies is if something financially or some kind of labor dispute happens with that one towing company, we are in a better position because we have a relationship with other companies, and we're going to be able to respond to that situation quickly. And the last thing is having multiple companies, we have very comparable data and performance, so we can ensure the best customer service because we can see what the industry is doing as a whole.
Awesome. Vice Mayor?
How do we come up with the data about response time? So we said we usually get they usually arrive with about 11 minutes. How do we?
Yes, Vice Mayor Gallego, I'll turn that over to Jessica Rothschild, who is managing these contracts for the police department.
Vice Mayor Gallego, we actually track each tow, we reconcile each tow record, and that gives us the response time. So I can pull a query that'll give me averages by precinct and by zone.
And I think we'd all love it to see the same service throughout the city. How are we doing right now?
Right now, we are ranging from 11 to 14 minutes citywide.
But
With
a
various
Phoenician
vendors.
could reasonably expect consistent service across the city.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
The service levels are consistent across the city?
They are. There is a little variation in responses, late responses to tows, depending on the area.
Because for me, I think we all of the people across the city pay taxes and deserve equally good service. And so
Absolutely.
I would love to see consistency across the city. And from my perspective, it might be easier if we just have one operator to manage that and reallocate resources. Because we don't do like 3 different body camera companies and ask them to compete and see who has the best innovations. We just say we have one company, we're going to train everyone, it'll be consistent. It's the same reason I don't love the idea of the Uber Lyft model of towing. I would find it very stressful if I needed a tow and 2 different companies showed up at the same time.
Sure.
And we're trying to compete for my business while I really want to work on, probably, I imagine if one is being towed, one is not having a good day. I can't think of any time where you need to be towed because you just won the lottery and you don't need the car anymore. Most of the scenarios I come up with, I think, are times of stress, and so just one provider seems like it would be easier, so that would be my preference.
Can I ask my understanding is that the RFP could be written in a way that one sole provider could go for all 4. Or it could be written that, or the sole provider could go for all 4, or a company could go for certain zones.
Yes, Councilwoman Pastor, that is correct. We could provide an option in the RFP where we ask the bidders to propose on each zone separately, as well as a citywide proposal, and we could do a either or both type scenario in the solicitation process and then build that into the evaluation.
Yes, Councilwoman Pastor, what we would need to do is on the all for one vendor, we would need to build in some requirements to address some of the concerns. Make sure they have tow yards in each area of the city so they're not being towed from the Ahwatukee area to North Phoenix. We would just build in some requirements. And then we could bid, they could bid on all or none, or they could bid on individual precincts. And then what's in the best interest of the city, we would do an analysis, and obviously we could award the contract that way.
Because it kind of reminds me, at least, there's many RFPs, but it kind of reminds me of the airport when people are bidding for their concession areas, and you can go as a package and bid for this certain whatever, and I don't know what they name, and then you could separate apart and then bid for this other kiosk if possible, but you could bid for multiple packages and take your risk, or you can just bid on one package and just take a risk there and just bid on one and not a multiple. That's kind of how I'm looking at what your response is, that it is possible. There are different, in this RFP, you could bid for one as a sole, or you can also bid for 2.
Yes, and we bid something similar over at Transit where the entire operation was won by one proposer, but they could bid individual garages. And so, yes, it is possible.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Williams?
You have 4 areas. Do you pay the same towing fee in every area, or is it based on distance?
I can add.
Sure.
Councilwoman Williams, sorry. I can answer that. The prices vary slightly. They range anywhere from $18 to $29 for a level 1 tow, which is a regular passenger size vehicle. It depends on which part of the city you're towed from. And then every vehicle owner pays the same amount for a 30-day tow versus a non-30-day tow. They pay a daily
A
storage
what
fee.
tow?
A 30-day hold
Oh, a 30-day hold.
versus a non-30-day.
Okay, and how much is that?
For a non-30-day tow, it's $30 a day storage, and for a 30-day hold tow, it's $15 per day.
And if I may?
Yeah, absolutely.
Chief, how's it worked with multiple vendors and dividing the city up like this?
Mr. Chairman, Councilwoman Williams, it's working fine. There was a reason last time that we went to 4 vendors, or 4 zones. We had some difficulty with the one vendor for the entire city. We had increased response times under what we've done the last couple years with the 4 zones. We've had less violations that we had to assess to the tow companies. Our 11 to 14 minutes, that's great. That gets our police officers back into service quickly. So it's working well. Could we go to 1? Could we go to 8? As long as it works as good as it's doing now and is bid appropriately from a police department perspective, we care, but we don't care that much how many zones they are. One of the other things that is really important to us is the customer service aspect of things. We order the tow. In Phoenix and in our state, we tow a lot of vehicles because 28, what is it, Jessica?
3511.
3511, we tow you if you have a suspended driver's license, revoked driver's license, certain DUIs. It's an automatic tow. So we tow 30,000, 35,000 vehicles a year. We have to do that timely and efficient. And when the police department's ordering that tow, from my humble opinion, it's nice to have that customer service aspect of the police department as the middleman. So, when there's a tow issue, they can go to us and Jessica can research it and provide that customer service level. So from our perspective, it's working fine the way we bid it last time. And it's certainly my recommendation to continue down that road.
Thank you.
Any other comments? I have a comment, just having a single point of contact, it makes it a lot easier for city staff. And I think if we can actually put in the RFP that they have to have 4 yards in each zone, or at least 4 zones and 1 yard in each of those 4 zones, and that they have to be under 20 minutes, I don't see a problem having a single source. The other thing too is that just the pricing alone, if you get towed in Paradise Valley or North Phoenix compared to South Phoenix, I think the price should be the same. And that's the other thing that I like to discuss is why are there different prices? Is there other models throughout the state or throughout the county or other cities where it's a single price or flat fee, where people aren't confused on why is it that I got towed the other day in North Phoenix, I got towed in South Phoenix, and there's 2 different prices.
Jessica, can you elaborate on that, please?
There are different scenarios that will change the price range. For example, if a vehicle is on its top, if it's off the roadway, then the price goes up. So there is a slight variation, and from my understanding, there is a slight variation depending on where you're towed from because of the previous negotiation and procurement process. It was competitive, and they came in with their best bid, and then it was decided who would win the award.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, if we adopted some kind of option 2-4 or where we did a citywide approach, that citywide process would have one price for the entire city. Whereas if we have 4 zones, then we would have different prices for each zone, possibly depending on how the solicitations were awarded or how the bids were awarded.
Councilmember Pastor?
So, let me see if I'm getting this right. So if something happens to me in North Phoenix, and I live in Central Phoenix, my tow may possibly be more, depending on whatever happened to my car. Maybe more because I'm thinking of distance, but it's just me in my mind thinking distance, where I could be in Central Phoenix and something happened to me on 7th Avenue in Osborne, and I will pay with the 4 different zones, wherever I guess what I'm thinking is if I'm on 7th Avenue in Osborne, and the towing place is on Washington and, 15th Avenue, I will pay less of a fee because of the proximity.
The pricing doesn't have anything to do with the location of where it's towed from to the tow yard location. It has to do with the precincts where the vehicles are towed from. So if you're towed from Central Phoenix, it may be $29. If you are in North Phoenix, in the Deer Valley area, off of Happy Valley Road in the I-17 area, you'll pay $18. It just depends on where you're towed from.
And
Okay.
Councilwoman Pastor, I can address that. Under the procurement process, the zones were bid so that you could, a small business, a small tow provider could bid on one zone or more than one zone. So they bid competitively, and that's why some of the rates are different under the current contract as well. Now, as Denise mentioned, if we bid it all or none, we would set, you bid a price for the city, for the entire city, based on, obviously, if a vehicle's on its upside down or on its side or so.
Vice Mayor?
We did, with the Proposition 104, we did a procurement where we had one engineering firm that would do the whole city, but then they would have the opportunity to have like a qualified vendors list where they could bring in added resources that they needed it. And I think that's something we might consider as a model here. Certainly there are single events, like we talked about the Final Four earlier, where there might be different situations. But in general, I hope one of the things I try to be consistent about here is one Phoenix, same levels of service for everyone throughout. So I guess I'm going to try to put Councilman Nowakowski's statement into a motion. So I would move option 3 with guaranteed service levels across the city, including facilities throughout the city. Councilman Nowakowski, how did I do with trying to capture? All right. I would love to see the
Okay.
same fee for all distances, although I do think it is fair to have different fees if a car is upside down.
Councilmember Williams has,
I'm not sure what option 3 is.
What is option
It
3?
could- Do you still have the same 4 zones?
Option 3 is bid the entire city as one contract. So no, there wouldn't be the 4 zones. It would be one contract, one tow provider. And like you mentioned, Councilwoman Gallego, we could have them subcontract with other towing companies to provide the service. Obviously, the requirements is to make sure they have tow yard facilities in each area of the city so that the response time is not an issue. You're not having to drive across the city to go pick up your car.
And I guess I would make the tow facility, the yards across the city, part of the motion. I will leave it to professional staff to negotiate how the service levels might. I'll leave that out of the motion.
Councilmember Williams?
Makes me a little nervous because right now with the 4 zones, each precinct knows the number to call and get immediate service. If we have one company and one number, then that could delay the process, it seems to me. I don't mind that we have one vendor, but I think it's probably, the 4 zones is still reasonable, because if we had a facility in each of the 4 zones, the officer would still have 4 numbers. Am I explaining this right?
Basically having one vendor, but 4 different numbers for each of the zones, right? So that it
Yeah,
continues.
as long, so you have the 4 zones, so there's an identified boundary for the officers to know which phone to use to get the quick service. See what I'm saying?
But with one vendor?
It could be.
Or it could be, I guess where I'm at on this is that what is best for the collective and what is best for our customer. And so it could be one sole vendor, or it could be the 4 different zones, however it works. So I would like to see the possibility of the competitiveness of a vendor being able to vote, being able to go for one as a sole vendor, but also be able to go for 4 regions. So I guess there should be 4 regions, but a sole vendor could go for all 4 regions, and then then a vendor could also go for, I'm just going to do 2. I don't know if I'm
Oh,
describing
and
that correctly.
I think that's absolutely the way, it makes good sense. We would bid all 4 zones, and you have the option as a small tow provider to bid one zone if you wanted to, or you could bid more than one. But then there's a completely different proposal. If it's in the best interest of the city, somebody could bid all 4 zones and be awarded the entire contract. It would be evaluated based on, the 4 zones compared to the total cost for the other 4 individual zones.
So basically, we would be modifying option 1, which is what staff is recommending, to allow for the tow companies to propose a citywide pricing structure. That way we can actually evaluate the pricing and the service for each zone, maximize competition, but at the same time, see what kind of pricing and service comes in if we did it from a citywide perspective.
I would second Vice Mayor's motion, but I would like to put some type of fixed pricing. I'm not sure what the state does or the county. Can you explain that to me?
I'm not familiar with what the, at the county level, what they do as far as pricing.
How about the state level?
I have not, I know that we've been in meetings together, but we've talked about, various scenarios, but not necessarily pricing.
I did a little bit of research in that they have set pricing or fixed pricing at the state level and also at the county level. I like to see that done with ourselves so that we have that flat rate throughout the city. So if you would add that to your motion, fixed pricing, I would actually
I
second
will add
that.
that to the motion, fixed pricing.
Then I would second that motion.
One of the things I like about one tow vendor is I am desperately hoping we will have new police precincts sometime in the near future. There is one zone right now that is just one precinct, and folks who attend this committee regularly know that I think that precinct is too large. But I hope that we will be able to re-precinct, given the good hiring update. I think the fact that there is one precinct that has its own zone maybe is further evidence that that precinct is quite large. I understand larger than the city of San Francisco. And so the things that more lock in the existing precincts make it even more difficult for us to get to the service levels I would like to see in the Maryville precinct.
Councilmember Williams.
Can you go over what the motion is? I'm not positive I know at this point.
One zone, consistent pricing throughout the city, so no differential based on where you are in the city. And then we just amended it to include, Councilman Nowakowski?
The fixed pricings such as the state has and the county.
If you could change that to 4 zones, I can support it.
So 4 zones
One
with,
bid and one.
One vendor,
and-
4 zones.
one
you
bidder
can bid
to
on
do
4.
4, yeah,
But,
to have 4 zones.
yeah, where now they can't, but one company could bid on all 4 zones and get it.
So what happens if we re-precinct?
If we what?
We'll have new precincts? Do we change the
Mr.
zones?
Well, we can always amend
Chairman,
the
the
contract.
precincts
amend it.
really don't have anything to do with it, as far as the zones. The precincts, you have multiple precincts in different zones, Zone B, for
Yeah.
example. The police precincts are strictly for our radio calls, has nothing to do with the tows by zone, if that makes any sense.
So one precinct is in 2 zones?
Yeah, we have, look at Zone B on your map. You have Desert Horizon Precinct and Mountain View Precinct all in that zone. So, and Councilwoman Williams, on your question earlier, the police officers, they have the numbers, but they go through radio to get the tows. Radio knows where the location is, and they'll, if I'm at 19th Avenue and Cactus, 900 Precinct.
Okay.
That's not 900, 35th Avenue and Cactus.
Just because you're leaving this, the memory can't go yet.
But the radio handles the tows, so they come out and on the racks. So that is all consistent.
Okay.
And that is very coordinated through our communications.
So
So
Chief,
precinct-
the
yes.
question would be if we had one vendor with yards in each of those 4 zones that could actually cover that area. So you have a call-in, then the dispatch would actually call that zone or that towing company, and they would send somebody from that area to cover that precinct, whatever.
Mr. Chairman, that would work for us, but we did not have that before we bid it in the 4 zones. So prior to that, we only had 1 yard in the city, and it was on South Side.
Oh, okay.
So that
That's
was the
what-
main, when we
Okay.
came here in 11, and I was here as well, doing that, it was better customer service citywide. So if you got towed at 19th and Cactus, you didn't have to go to the river bottom to get your car.
Got
Right.
it.
It was in close proximity to where you got towed from.
So that's what would cause the change for the 4.
Yeah, and there were
4
additional
zones.
reasons
Got
that
it.
caused that change back in that time too. We were reliant on one vendor and we had very little backup. built in. And we had difficulties with that particular vendor. And we had our response times, although we didn't track them, they were a major concern for us. That's why when we bid the 4 zones, we built in time, the 20-minute time frame so our police officers get back on the street. Because we're stuck under law. We have to tow your car because you have a suspended license. My police officer's stuck there until that tow gets there. So that's the critical.
That's what I wanted to ask.
That's the critical thing, no matter how you bid it. We have to have timely response.
Okay, so what happened, I know I don't know how I end up in these experiences, but I do. So what happened is there was an accident. I went to the accident because it was a friend, and I stood there and waited with them as everything was happening. But what happened is we got all the paperwork and everything, but we needed to wait till the towing company arrived. And I asked the police officer, I was like, oh, what's going on? And he's like, no, I have to sit here and wait until it arrives. Well, it took longer than 20 minutes. And I don't know if it was just the way, but it did take longer
What zone
than.
were you in?
I was in.
No, I'm just kidding.
Were you an Anthem?
No, I wasn't. I was in Zone B. And so now that makes sense because in all reality, it's really relieving the police officers to getting back onto the streets and being able to then go to another call. When a towing company is late or not arriving when they need to be or however it works, then we're tying up the police officer not to move on once they're done with their work.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. And through Jessica, and she can elaborate on this, we ding the tow company for being late. We track it, and we charge them a violation fee. I believe it's $75 when they're late. So there are sanctions built in the current, the way we're doing it now. So if the tow company is late, you get penalized for it. The tow company gets penalized for it. Correct,
So-
Jessica?
Yes, that is correct. If they are over the time limit for response, then we issue a tow contract violation and give them the opportunity to respond to that. If it is sustained, they are assessed a $75 fee.
So I guess what I would like to know is if the RFP is written in a way that the past doesn't happen,
Right.
and what is currently happening now can happen in the future. If that's a sole vendor or if that's competitive, however we end up going, I would like to see those elements in the RFP. And I don't know if that makes sense. I'm just conceptual.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee. Again, we can modify our option 1 where we ask for proposals for each zone to include an additional option in that solicitation process where we can ask for a citywide approach, a citywide model. That way, we can receive these proposals and really evaluate if it makes sense for us to award a contract by zone or award the contract citywide. And we can also evaluate the service that's being provided under both of those models. In addition, we can put requirements in the solicitation to ensure wait times and customer service and so forth. And all of that can be taken into account during the evaluation process.
And looking at the recommendations up there on the points itself, 1,000 points, I don't really see anything about community involvement. You can have bidders that come from back east that are involved with the Boys and Girls Club, YMCA and all that. And or even local individuals involved with the 100 Club or whatever. I think we should have maybe 50 or 100 points added on community involvement. I think it's really important that when you turn in a resume applying for a job, they ask for all your community involvement in there. And then you look at the person's character at that time. So I think it's the best practices of a business coming into our city, if it's a local business or if it's a business from back east or from California, wherever, that they have some types of best practices of giving back to the community. If it's helping out a school, cleaning up a neighborhood. But I'd like to see maybe a low number in there, 50 to 100 points in some type of community involvement.
Did you take that out of capacity, experience, and past performance?
I think it needs to be something, because that's more about that time. And I think I would really like to see something like that. I know we've done that at the airport, where we really included a lot of that involvement with the schools and the community and all that. And that's what makes us have such great partners within our airport. And I like to see something like this in towing also.
Councilman Nowakowski, I spoke to the law department about those requirements, and they did not like those requirements. And I'll be honest with you, whether it's charitable donations or community involvement, they view it as a violation of potentially the gift policy. So we have to be careful.
But how can it be a gift if we're not receiving it? It's actually a person's business character or best practices of getting involved in the community somehow, some way. The city is not, we're not manning those individuals to give to the parks or give to a certain program or senior centers. That basically, we just want to have a part of our evaluation is a part of their culture of a business to be involved in the community that they actually work and participate in. And that's basically looking at a character of a business.
I
a
understand
culture
the
of a
social
business.
responsibility, but the concern from the law department is the vendors would be competing against each other to do more community involvement. And how do we as procurement folks during the evaluation process
And I think
measure
that's
that?
great for the city of Phoenix.
Okay.
I mean, for nonprofits, for church groups, for schools, that our businesses are competing to actually get involved and helping out in our community.
Oh, there it is. That's legal.
I think I like to have some kind of
Have the
legal
law
point. yeah.
department.
Like, because I don't know.
Here's Dan Dunn.
Mr. Dan? Confusing.
We're getting full support of the city manager's office at this council meeting.
So, I'm sorry, I just walked in the door, so you're going to have to repeat the question because I really don't want to misstate anything. So,
Well, basically, we're just looking at the point system that we have to actually win this RFP. And I was saying I would like to see some type of community involvement. It's not involvement of giving back to city programs, but involvement with schools, nonprofits, Boys and Girls Club, YMCA. If it's a company from New York or LA, that their involvement and what's their best practices of getting involved in the community and actually supporting their local community that they're doing business in.
as part of the criteria to determine the four zones. So you can request that information as part of the criteria to determine who should award, but bottom line, you can't compel it. In other words, it's something you can't compel a company to provide free service, because then there are potential issues with the gift clause and the like. But essentially, you can have it as one of the criteria, and the committee could make that evaluation.
So we couldn't put a point behind it, 25 points that the best practice of your company is to help.
Are you involved in the
Mr.
community, and what have you done with the community? But bottom line, you cannot require them to do that.
Mr. Chairman, if I could interrupt, I'm so
Right.
sorry. When staff contacted the law department about this issue, the law department advised that that could not be a consideration when we talked to them yesterday.
Right.
And that had been suggested in previous procurements, but had been analyzed and rejected at that time.
It's kind of confusing. 'cause
It is
I-
confusing because, go ahead, I'm sorry.
As an employer of, I run 9 radio stations. I mean, people give me applications all the time. We look at their community involvement, their awards, and everything that they've done within the community to see what type of character, what type of community involvement they're going to have once they relocate into our city. I mean, that's kind of silly that they wouldn't be part of this Team Phoenix that we've been creating and helping out with, not saying city programs, but any program within the community, from churches to the 100 Club to YMCA, Boys and Girls Club. It's kind of to look at what the culture and the best practices of that company is. So when you're evaluating a company, what makes a person different from the other? And I think that when you look at pricing, that's, most companies will be about the same. And the second point, also the scope of work, I think they'll be very competitive there. And I think that what makes people different is their character and their culture, their company of giving back and helping out within the community. I think that's the type of city we want, is companies that get involved and engage themselves in the community. So I'm not sure how that's a gift box.
Right. Well, Chairman Nowakowski, let me go back and consult with the advice that was previously given. You know, I obviously don't have all the facts, and I don't want to give you bad advice. And so let me go back, find out how that advice was given. Maybe I am not aware of the facts. And so let me follow up, and we can follow up and get back to you and get back to the subcommittee as quickly as possible.
Councilmember Pastor?
Is it, I'm going with the community piece. Is it more of, and I'm thinking of a job description. So is it more of minimum qualifications and then desired qualifications? And that's in how my mind, I'm looking at it on a RFPs are different, but I'm just looking at a job description where a minimum qualification, you meet all the minimums, but here are some of the desired qualifications we would like. And tell us about, tell us if you meet those desired qualifications. What have you done for the community? Things like that. It doesn't necessarily, it's a point or anything, but it's a space or area maybe that they're able to tell about what they do for the community. I don't know how it works. I think we probably should talk to legal in the sense of
Right.
everybody getting, and
Yes.
because I think
What-
we're going off into some area that we shouldn't be, but.
Correct.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman and Councilwoman Pastor, one idea could be to continue the item, get some additional input, and make sure that we're operating from a firm footing so that we don't veer off.
Do you need a motion? Or, there wasn't a second on the other one, so that was, it's
Oh, I
still
actually-
lingering?
no,
Or
I
you
actually did the
and
second,
so
right.
Now what do we do? I mean, do I substitute motion to continue, or what? I don't know.
If you'd like to make a substitute motion, I think that would be appropriate.
But we want to continue it, right? In order to get all our facts?
It's really up to you.
Well, I mean, how are we going to, if we want some elements, or we want the community piece in, we need to continue it in order to go back and understand.
Chairman
So is
Nowakowski,
that important?
yes, I would recommend that. I would recommend a motion to continue so that we can go back and actually get the answers to the questions that you've raised today, and then bring it back to the subcommittee at the next available session. And so that would be my recommendation. That would have to be by motion and
I think
second.
this is a relatively minor thing, and so we could move it forward and talk about it at full council.
Because basically what we're doing is, it's either points or no points, right?
You could also, the other option, legal option, would be to move it forward to council for recommendation with the caveat that the full council would review the possibility of community participation, I guess, as a criteria, either with points or without points.
Can I ask one clarifying question just in case this? So we've had some RFPs in my district where the successful bidder had received, I think, some credit for partnering with local community groups and having more ties that would allow them to do a better community involvement process, that they had good, the partnership, the team they assembled, the fact that it really had roots and history did get points. So is that a different, how was that possible?
Again, you can establish criteria depending upon the type of service that is being procured. You can establish that criteria, but again, we'd have to go back and look how the solicitation is established and make sure that the bottom line with any procurement is you have to preserve a level playing field for all participants. And so we'd have to go back and make sure that that's followed through here.
So the motion that we have on the floor right now is actually a single vendor service provider keeping the 4 zones intact. And then we have the towing fee is a fixed price based on DPS's model, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, are you saying 4 zones, one company can get all 4, or it has to be one company?
You prefer,
I prefer
Two
that they
options.
they bid on all 4 areas, but one company can be successful in all 4 areas.
So you're talking about option one, the original,
Well, and if,
with,
with amendments,
right, right,
a modified version, it's kind of a hybrid.
yeah.
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, again, we can modify option 1, which allows the companies to bid on each zone separately. We can modify it with adding an option in the solicitation for them to provide a bid citywide. So that way, we're basically covering both scenarios, where you can bid individually on the zones, or you can bid citywide, or both. And that way, we can evaluate those scenarios. So that would be a modification to option 1 with a modification to allow for a citywide proposal.
I don't know how we, there's a
I think
motion,
that
though.
it's a level
Is there
playing field and
friendly-
can probably get us the best price.
So maybe if there's a motion, let's vote on that motion. Or unless there's a secondary motion.
Well,
I have a second motion, I guess, a friendly motion, or, I'd rather.
I'd just do a substitute.
Substitute, yeah.
She's
I
gonna
just rather-
quit. She'll have to
I'd rather,
take a
I'd
minute
rather
for
substitute.
I'm
I have a
confused.
substitute motion, option 1 with the combo of both. That's, I mean, of being able to, the 4 zones, one company could bid for all 4 zones, or or they can choose 1 or 2, I don't know. You explain it.
So what you could propose is option 1 with the modification, with an additional option to propose citywide. So they can either propose on each zone, more than one zone, or a citywide option, which is one price for the entire city.
Would
That's
they
my
be-
motion.
Would they be submitting 3?
They could possibly be
Okay.
submitting 3 different proposals.
Second.
Alrighty, so we have a motion and a second, so just clarification, we're going with option number 1, and are we still doing the fixed pricing based on DPS?
Yeah.
If that's beneficial to us.
Okay, so
You
then,
could look into all of this. Okay.
all right, so we have the 4 zones. You can actually have one provider for all 4 zones, or you can have a mixture of 4 different providers, right?
Correct.
And that we would be fixed pricing based on DPS model. And then we'll look into that whole community stuff later. We can add that to the full console.
Yes, that's correct, and we will follow up.
Alrighty, so we have a motion. Any other discussion on that motion?
I don't know, they're
One quick
discussing.
clarifying question.
I don't know, they were discussing, so I don't know if there's an issue.
I'm not familiar with the DPS model presently, but I can look into it. My concern with the fixed pricing is it is a competitive pricing. So the vendors, the tow providers will propose on option zone 1 or zone 2, and they'll compete against each other to win. If they proposed all the same fixed pricing, that would be difficult to determine who was the overall best proposer. So that's some of the challenge. Now, what we could do is, if they're going to provide multiple, propose on multiple zones, we could ask them to make it the same for all the zones.
I don't understand what you mean by the DPS and,
You know, I think there's some confusion. I would like to maybe continue this till.
Thank you.
So we can actually sit down and get some more information on the
there's a motion.
fixed pricing and all that. So
There's a motion.
So the motion, so I didn't hear a second on the.
Yeah, I did.
She did second it. Then it's been moved and seconded, so the maker can withdraw the motion and the second
Okay, I
can
withdraw my
agree to
second.
that.
And I
And then the chair can accept a new motion.
All right? Or can the chair
Withdraw the
actually
second.
continue it?
No substitute.
Yeah. The
Move to
chair,
continue.
so I think the chair could entertain a motion to continue until the next available session, and then we would need a second and then proceed to vote.
So moved.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, they can go bring, at that next meeting, you can bring forth DPS's rates, maybe the sheriff's office, I think I
Right.
heard that. I don't know if they're the same, and then a comparison chart to what we pay and how that all works, because I think it's very beneficial that we know that. Thank you.
What we can do is we can bring some examples of these different options that we've been looking at and how the pricing would work. So that would be probably a clearer picture of what we're actually discussing here.
All righty, well, thank you so much. We're on item number 12, public safety budget update. It's just the update. Yeah, it's just the update. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee. My name is Jill Salai. I work for the police department. And I'm here to give you an overview of our budget through actuals through the end of August. For this fiscal year, our budget is $608 million. We have spent about $104 million, and we're at 17% of our budget, which we are right on budget right now. For the month of August, we're about 14% higher than we were last year, but that has to do with a lot of one-time charges at the beginning of the fiscal year and our minimum staffing for overtime and also some costs for the protest. Our top 10 expenditures are mainly personal services, salaries being the top one at $44 million. And then at the very bottom, we have our liability insurance, which is a little bit over $1 million. And then our revenues for this year, we're pretty much the same we're about the same on track as we were last year for grants, court awards, our false alarms, our vehicle impound, pawn shop, our SRO special events, and our IGAs and task force. And if you have any questions?
Any questions from my colleagues? No questions at all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Morning, Chairman Nowakowski and members of the subcommittee. I'm Ken Lake. I'll be presenting the fire department's budget today. So our overall budget this year is $317 million, of which to date we've spent $49 million, 181. That's about 16.6% is the reporting period, so we're just slightly under what we anticipated. For our monthly expenditures, again, and much like the police department, we had some one-time expenditures in July and August, but otherwise we're tracking pretty true to what we expected for this part of the year. And then as our top 10 expenditures, again, much like the police department, salaries, pensions, health insurance, those types of activities tend to trend of the highest of the list. As you come down the list, most of it has to do with part-time rescue, medical, dental, and those type of things. But we're trending at this point in time pretty much exactly where we expected to be. And then revenues, our top three revenue collections, again, our ambulance transports came out significantly higher in the first part of the period. That had a lot to do with transferring over some of the collections from the last fiscal year, but we're trending above what we think is going to be our overall in terms of total collections for this year.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. Sorry, I guess I should have given Fire an opportunity to answer any questions. But seeing none, we'll talk about the court.
I don't think you want any questions.
Our general fund budget for this year, as you can see, a little over $28 million. As with my colleagues here through the first 2 months of this fiscal year, we are pretty much close to just slightly under where we would have expected to be to date on the budget. So a little less than 1% less than the budget and year over year where we were last year. If we can go to the next slide. Some interesting numbers, and the variances are off for us from what we'd expect. That has to do with the reservation of funds encumbrance and the way that it was posted. So it skews our percentages this month, should be solved by next month. But we remain exactly in line, once you adjust for that, with where we are expecting to be. And if you can see on the next slide that, again, like my colleagues, we see our top 10 expenses continuing to be personnel costs. Let's talk about revenues real quick, and then I'd like to give you an update on our compliance assistance program, because it's been several months. If you look at the fines there and you look at the variance, you see that this year over last year in the first 2 months, we're down about 40% on the fines. That is, frankly, not at all surprising when you look at the numbers. We continue to see declining numbers of filings in terms of civil traffic tickets, greater actually than that 40%. You know, in the past here, especially here at the subcommittee, we've had discussions about that. It's a trend we've seen for a long time. It's a trend that I know you've spoken to Chief Yonner about, and he's mentioned some of the drivers for with regard to staffing levels. A couple other things I just think are important to keep in mind. There's a broader context to this. This actually is not just Phoenix. It's not even just Arizona. You know, there was a story in the Republic, which was national news, sometime last month, which actually tracked some similarly declining numbers in traffic tickets nationwide over the last several years. One of the other things that is particularly affecting us, as you know, was what happened with photo enforcement, and something that we expect to see coming back online. So again, not at all what anything surprising to us when we look at the numbers of what's coming in the door. But let's talk about the Compliance Assistance Program. As I said, we've updated on that, I think last time, but that's been several months. Were it not for the Compliance Assistance Program, the variance that you see up there in terms of fines would be significantly different, would be significantly greater. Just got news a few minutes ago that earlier this morning we passed 8,500 participants in the Compliance Assistance Program. Again, as I like to say, 8,500 success stories. That's 8,500 people who are potentially able to get the driver's license back and avoid potentially the cycle and the trap that was referenced earlier when we talk about the towing, for example, that happens mandatorily when someone is driving on a suspended license. It's one of the things that we are hoping to be able to see a great reduction in over the coming years, when we have a number of people who are back in the system, are compliant with the court's orders, and who are not suffering those collateral consequences anymore. We are continuing to track it. We have found a better long-term compliance rate with this program than we have had in the past. The approach that we've had in place for the last year of doing much more in terms of negotiation with individuals about what they can actually sustainably afford to pay on their financial obligations is paying off. People are, in fact, paying at least as good and slightly better numbers than they ever have in terms of staying on track with that. To date, there has been approximately $4.1 million collected as a result of this program. Again, that's, as we know, not all city money, but about $2.1 million of that goes directly to the city's general fund. And that is money that has been outstanding obligations, some of it for years. We've had people that have opted into the program who have owed us money from as far back as the early 90s. Again, the best thing about this program, I think, is not only the success that it brings for the individuals who are able to get, back on their feet, get compliant with the court's orders, potentially get the driver's license back. That is also not a single one of those 8,500 people having gone away from the court being upset about making those payments to us. So again, I like to see it as a win-win. We're expecting to see further successes as we go. Let me update you two other things I think are important for particularly this subcommittee to know. Because you have been such important support of the programs that we've put in place and the strides that we're making. Earlier this year, I had the privilege to be appointed by the Chief Justice of the Arizona Supreme Court to a task force called Fair Justice for All that was specifically set to look at pretrial detention practices and costs, as well as fines and fees and the effects that has on people's lives. I will tell you that the task force we released our report here last month. I can send you all copies of how to look at it online, but the reason I bring it to your attention is that several of the 66 recommendations that were made there were specific recognitions of some of what we're doing in Phoenix, including the Compliance Assistance Program, and recommendations that other limited jurisdiction courts in the state should all take a look at it. We have had great success with that. We have several courts around the valley that are ramping up trying to replicate what we're doing. And if we can see that become a full statewide movement, that's going to be good for all of us. Several other recommendations that came out of the task force, things that we are in fact already doing or that we're working on. Finally, 2 weeks ago, I had the privilege to spend some time in Washington at a summit put on by the Department of Justice that was specifically about fines and fees reform and efforts that are going on across the nation. Had a chance to talk to them about the task force report here at the state level and took the opportunity to tell them specifically what we're doing here in Phoenix. I want you to know there was a great reception there. This was a room full of a lot of the civil society organizations that have been working for several years now, and not to be too indelicate about it, but have spent the last couple of years suing state court systems across the country very successfully for not doing some of the things that we've been doing on our own for over the last year. Very successfully received. I want you to know that the program that you've been supportive of is not only making a difference here, but it is something that is in fact being looked at. We like to talk very often about models that we do here in Phoenix. This is one that is being looked at very seriously by limited jurisdiction courts now across the country. And with that, I'm open to any questions that you might have.
Any questions, comments? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can I, Chairman, ask one quick question about the Zika item,
Oh,
which was item 4?
absolutely.
Item 4 for information only was on the Zika virus, and that's something that I think is on the minds of a lot of Arizonans. And should there be funding available to the state, are we in a competitive place to pursue that and make sure that we can do our best to keep our community safe and healthy?
Good morning, Vice Mayor Gallego. Would you please repeat that question? I have with me Assistant Chief Kelvin Barty and our subject matter expert for public health, David Leinenweber, to address your questions.
Wonderful. Should there be funding available for the state of Arizona to combat Zika virus? Are we in a good position to pursue that? I think there's many unique risks in Phoenix, including the fact that I think we expect the virus perhaps to first arrive via people who have traveled to Zika-infected regions, and
Sure.
we manage the airport, but we also have a variety of things like standing water that we could address at city facilities, and communication. We're the form of government that is often closest to most people, where they might turn for information first, even though in this case we are not the lead.
Sure. I'm going to have David, if you would, answer that, and then I'll follow up.
Vice Chair, Chairman, members of the committee. So currently, the Zika funding, I know our mayor signed off on support of the Congress to send more money to the states. So that was not released. But our state is currently receiving funding. The problem is right now is that there's just it was a small amount of funding. The net funding was moved from the state health department to the county health department. Currently, the county health department is not even able to keep up with the current funding that they have received to continue the good work that they're doing. But if you would support the Congress and push them a little bit harder, I guess it was what we're asking, is that that money would then trickle down to us, because we partner every day with the county health department. They're a great lead. They work very hard, very diligently for the abatement of the mosquitoes, for the education of the people, as far as if it's going to happen, when it's going to happen. So any support that we can push our congressman to do, I think would be great for our city.
Okay. I'm optimistic that they will pass additional funding shortly, and I hope that we are ready to make sure Phoenix gets our fair share of.
We are definitely in line, and because we work daily with the physicians, Dr. Bob England, Dr. Rebecca Sonnenschein, and the rest of that. They have what's called the Office of Preparedness and Response. City of Phoenix, the Homeland Defense Bureau, the Fire Department, the Police Department, very closely with them on a variety of issues. This is one of those.
Vice Mayor Gallego, members of the subcommittee, just to add, we're going to add it to the 2017 agenda for the federal agenda through James Arlosky to look at how can we add funding for this prevention initiative that we should have. Because you're right, we are seeing more and more of that coming into the states from other countries.
Wonderful. We did some work for it on vector control at the last council meeting, but
Okay, yes.
there is more to be done. And
Sure.
those of us that represent districts that have had mosquito problems in the past are always nervous, especially as you look at some of the charts of where Zika might be next year.
Sure.
And we are not in one of the regions now, but that does not mean we won't be.
Absolutely.
Thank you. That's it.
Proactive, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. With that, we're on item number 13, which is future agenda items.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Councilmember Williams?
I'm sure you've read in the paper and heard about Adobe Mountain being transformed into an adult center.
Right.
And and Jim Waring and I both have been working with the representatives in that area, as well as a very large active community who was surprised, as we all were, by DOC putting it there. And although we are all very adamant that it has to be closed, where they relocate it, one of the representatives has said downtown Phoenix. So I would like to have a total briefing on that and talk about alternatives, because Councilman Waring and I have both been very outspoken. Yes, relocate it, but that does not mean in the city of Phoenix.
Right.
So I think we need to have a discussion and a position.
I agree. So that can be a future agenda item then.
Yes, please.
Any other future agenda items? I was thinking that if we can get an update on the domestic violence.
Oh.
I was seeing that October is Domestic Violence Month. That would be good. And also, if we can come up with a plan for police and fire on the recruitment, on the fire side of it, of Hispanics and females, and an update of the veterans, how many veterans are actually being recruited. And also on the police side of it, their plans on recruiting more African Americans, and also numbers of veterans that are being recruited also. If we can get an update next time on those issues, that'd be great.
And pretrial detention practices was something we discussed also.
Anything else? With that, meeting's adjourned. Thank you. Thank you.